everyone, welcome back, or welcome if you are new. I am so excited you clicked on this video. So today I am going to do some recommendations for books by Black authors about the Black experience. And I definitely want to disclaimer this by saying that there are so many amazing Black booktubers that I recommend, and I'm going to link a whole bunch of them down below. Definitely go check out their channels and their recommendations as well. I also want to make sure I clarify that despite the fact that I am doing this list right before Black History Month, February in the United States, I think it's different in other countries. But I very much think we should all be reading from Black authors, queer authors, Asian authors, authors from all different walks of life that are different from yours. Reading Black authors in February is great if that's what you're focusing on, but we should really be making an effort to read from diverse backgrounds all year long. So with that out of the way, let's get into the books. So I will start with one that has been a favorite since I read it, and that is Black Book by Mateo Oscaripor. This book is very much a satire of a Black man kind of infiltrating like a very white-focused, white-centric office job. And just the way he gets treated, and, you know, he breaks the fourth wall, which I think is a really cool way to tell a story. And this one is just really, I mean, it's funny and it's just interesting because it's such an over-the-top, I guess, example of the way that others are treated in the workplace. But, I mean, it's also one of those things that you're like, I believe that this happened somewhere as well. I did an entire reading vlog of a reread I did last year, which I will for sure link if you want to know more about that book. But it's really good, and if you want one that's a little more lighthearted, I guess, that's one to check out. One that has actually not released at the time of this video, but I read an early copy of, is Good Dirt by Charmaine Wilkerson. She wrote a book called Black Cake a few years back that was just incredible. It's a book I still think about and recommend to people all the time. So Good Dirt is her newest. So this follows a woman named Ebby Freeman who, when she was 12, I think, maybe a little younger, is a witness to her brother being shot to death inside their home. In the same shooting, this jar, which was a family heirloom from pre-Civil War South, was also destroyed. This crime was never solved, and she's from a very well-to-do family. However, they are one of the only Black families in, like, white New England. So she's an adult now, but of course, that trauma never leaves you. She's an adult now. She's engaged to a man from an affluent white family who leaves her on their wedding day, just no-shows the whole thing. Her family is not want to be involved in another scandal. However, this is kind of unavoidable. So we kind of go back and forth in the timelines between the pre-Civil War days of this enslaved man, Moses, who is where the story starts with the jar, and we get a whole lot of kind of background on like how it came to be in the Freeman family. And then in the present day, we're learning about Ebby and kind of how she is faring after being left on her wedding day, and kind of why did he leave her, because there was like no explanation. So this is just a really interesting story, a really beautiful story, and I mean, to be honest, I think this gives a really good example of just the way that like it feels like the goalposts are always moving for Black folks in America. Like, this family came from nothing and over generations has become this wealthy, affluent family, and yet they were still looked down upon by other folks in this white community that they live in. And it's just like, they just can't win, basically. So it's just incredibly well written. The characterization is incredible, and like, I highly recommend it. Another one that has sort of a similar premise is The Violin Conspiracy by Brendan Slocum. This was one of my absolute favorite books a couple years ago. It still lives on my favorite bookshelf. So this one is about a man named Ray who falls in love with classical music as a child, but his family can't afford his own instrument, and so he's, you know, using rentals or whatever. Until one day he finds in his grandmother's attic this old fiddle. And he starts to get more famous as, you know, he does so. He realizes that this is an incredibly rare and valuable instrument. And it's been through his family for years and years and years, but as his, you know, star rises and people start to know who he is, the ancestors of his family's enslavers are saying that it belongs to them. And so on the eve of this prestigious competition that he is going to be participating in, it goes missing. So this is definitely like a mystery, but again, it shows so much about how like they just keep making it more difficult for Black people to get ahead in America. And so I really just found this book to be chilling and so incredibly written, and who knew that I would be so interested in a book about classical music, but it really is just incredible. The next book I want to recommend is Lucky Girl by Irene Muchemi Indiritu. So this is one that I read a few years back, and I just was absolutely floored by it. This is about a girl named Soila who lives in Kenya. She has lived an incredibly sheltered life. She comes from a very wealthy family, but she is also very headstrong and wants to, you know, do her own thing and be her own person. So after she ends up being assaulted by a trusted man in her life, she flees to America for college, and she finds out just how different it is to be Black in America versus Kenya. Obviously, very different. She is just shocked by the entitlement of her wealthy white classmates, by the wealth disparity, and how much poverty there also is. In Kenya, I think a lot of American culture, in other countries too, is very glamorized, and they think everyone's rich and lives in Hollywood. But, you know, that's very much not the case. She befriends a Black American girl who, you know, kind of gives her the inside information on how, like, yeah, girl, racism's a real thing, like a really real thing. And so it's just kind of how she reconciles her Kenyan background with this new life in America. And of course, you know, she falls in love with a white guy. And so there's all that to kind of grapple with. So yeah, this one was incredibly written. I can't believe it's a debut. I still can't believe it, and I read this several years ago, so definitely want to check out. Next is You Were Always Mine by Joe Piazza and Christine Pride. This is a writing duo. One of them is Black and one of them is white. They kind of tend to write these books together that like focus on the experience of living in America from two different perspectives. So they also wrote a book called We Are Not Like Them that was very good, but I liked this one just a little more. This is about a woman named Cinnamon who is just like living her life. We get a lot about her upbringing, but you know, she's kind of living a life she's pretty happy with, and she's working at a community college, I believe. Every Friday, she has lunch on this particular bench near campus, and this other woman named Daisy comes and sits with her, and they sort of develop this friendship because they are just having lunch together, and they don't know each other, but they become close over time. And so one day Daisy doesn't show, and in her place, however, is a baby in a carrier. Now, Daisy is white and Cinnamon is Black.
Conveniently forgot to mention that the baby does belong to Daisy. She was pregnant the whole time, but it was hard to tell because she was overweight. So she also left a note for Cinnamon. Forgot that was kind of important to note.
And so for Cinnamon to basically take this baby and figure out what to do with it, it's something that I think a lot of us, specifically white folks, would not think about, but it is definitely like an optics thing that Cinnamon is thinking about. And so through time, she figures out who Daisy really is, and, you know, what should she be doing with this baby? Her marriage starts to suffer, and then she ends up finding out who Daisy's grandparents are. They end up, like, coming forward, and they are super, super racist and would basically do anything to gain custody of this baby. But Cinnamon has a really hard time, you know, thinking about the fact that this little child would be raised into this family. And in a lot of ways, this reminded me of Small Great Things by Jodi Picoult. However, she is not a Black author, so I would definitely recommend reading this one over that one. However, read both. They're both great. My next recommendation is One of Our Kind by Nicola Yoon. This was actually one of my favorite books that I read in 2024, so obviously a big winner for me. So this focuses a little more towards like social horror, where prior I think these were a lot more like literary fiction. So this is about a family who moves into this neighborhood called Liberty. And this whole neighborhood is all Black families. And, you know, the goal is to really like amplify Black culture in this community. Despite the way this community is advertised, it is definitely different. You know, she is expecting to have lots of like liberal, like involved with social justice kind of community, and really everyone there is like, well, that's not us, that's the others, the other type of Black people. And so, you know, she's pretty horrified. And everyone there also is obsessed with this wellness center and these treatments that they're having done. And, you know, she just keeps resisting it. She's like, you guys, that's really not for me. And then she learns a dark secret about the founders of this community. That is all I'll say on that one. But this book was brilliant. I thought it was just absolutely terrifying in a super like slow burny, creepy way. I don't know how else to describe it, but it was definitely one that left my jaw on the floor when I was done. So if you like books that, you know, are in the social horror kind of realm, this is a must read. Next up is a book set right here in my beautiful town of Philadelphia, and that is Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reed. This was a super popular book back in, I think, like 2019 or so. This is about a woman named Amira, who is a young Black woman who takes a job working for this wealthy influencer type, Alex. And Alex is a white woman. So one night, Alex and her husband are kind of having a fight, and she asks Amira to take her daughter to like anywhere out of the house for her, you know, she just needs to not be at home. So she's like, okay, sure. And she takes her to a grocery store. They're having fun, whatever. And then all of a sudden she's approached by a security guard who is insistent that she kidnapped the child. Now, the only way that they actually end up letting her go is when the father comes to the grocery store and sorts it out. This incident is filmed and it kind of escalates, and, you know, the book follows like the fallout and the aftermath of that. This was a book that definitely stuck with me. I still think about this book, and I read it back when it came out. This definitely is a good one that I think all white women who call themselves feminists should read, because I don't know really who I would call the main female character, but Alex is very much a feminist. She runs this like feminist media company, but the intersectional part of it is kind of not there. So this was just such a good book. I think this is a book, yeah, like I said, a lot, like white people really should read, because it really does show things that we don't necessarily think about, that Black people have to think about a lot more in certain situations. So those are some of the books that I definitely would recommend for Black History Month, but also whenever, because we should just, you know, be reading from Black authors all year long. I am gonna link some of my favorite Black booktubers below, as well as some other books that I would recommend that I didn't really have like enough time to talk about. I didn't want to make this video too long, but other books that I would recommend. Once again, I just want to say please go check out other creators, other Black creators, and their videos on the subject, get their recommendations. I think that is really important, and you know, part of Black History Month, at least as far as I'm concerned, is about amplifying those voices that get overlooked. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, I would love it if you would, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!